The needle glided through the fabric with precision, each stitch a small victory against the fatigue that weighed on Emma Hartwell's shoulders. The candle beside her burned low, casting uneven shadows across the peeling walls of her tiny Mayfair atelier. It was almost 2 in the morning, and the sky-blue silk dress resting on her lap needed to be ready by dawn. Lady Pemberton would tolerate no delays, especially not from a seamstress who depended on every commission to survive. The sound of hurried footsteps on the cobbled street made Emma lift her gaze from her sewing. Nothing unusual for London in 1823, she thought, returning her attention to the delicate embroidery that would adorn the dress's neckline. But then she heard something different, something that made her pause completely. The sharp cry of a child, desperate and solitary in the cold March night. Emma let the dress fall onto the chair and approached the small window that overlooked Bruton Street. The faint light from the corner lamp revealed a tiny figure huddled against the stone wall of the neighboring house. A boy, no more than 5 or 6 years old, dressed in clothes that even in the dim light she recognized as too fine for an ordinary abandoned child. Without hesitation, Emma grabbed her worn shawl and hurried down the narrow steps that led to the street. The night air cut like a razor, and she wondered how long that child had been there, trembling. "Little one?" she called softly, kneeling beside the boy. He shrank back further, his green eyes wide with fear, shining wetly on his tear-stained face. "Don't be afraid. Where is your mother?" The question triggered a fresh wave of sobs. The boy buried his face in his knees, his thin body shaking violently. Emma wrapped her shawl around him, feeling through the thin fabric how icy cold he was. She didn't wake up." The childlike voice finally emerged, broken and choked. "I tried to call her, but she didn't wake up. The lady told me to run if something happened." Emma's heart clenched painfully. She knew this kind of situation better than she wished. London was full of similar stories, mothers who died leaving children to fend for themselves. She looked around the deserted street, searching for any sign of someone who might be looking for the boy, but found only silence and shadows. "Come," she said gently, extending her hand. "You can't stay out here in the cold. Let's go inside. I'll prepare something warm for you." The boy hesitated, but the trembling in his limbs overcame his fear. He placed his small hand in hers, allowing Emma to guide him up the stairs to her modest apartment. The candlelight better revealed his state. His dark green velvet coat was covered in dust, his leather shoes were of exceptional quality, and his face, now that she could see it properly, had the aristocratic pallor of someone who rarely played under the sun. Emma settled him into her only armchair, warming water for tea while watching the child look around with curious but tired eyes. Her apartment was Spartan, consisting only of the room that served as both atelier and bedroom, and a tiny kitchen. But it was clean, and the carefully mended curtains lent a touch of warmth to the room. "What's your name?" she asked, offering him a mug of warm tea sweetened with a bit of the precious sugar she reserved for special occasions. "Christopher," the boy replied, holding the mug with both small hands. "Christopher Ashford." Emma felt something cold slide down her spine. Ashford. Even she, who rarely mingled in circles beyond her commissions, knew that name. William Ashford, the magnate whose shipping and trade businesses extended from the East Indies to the Americas. A man whose fortune rivaled that of some minor lords, whose name appeared frequently in the newspapers, always associated with grand ventures and even greater wealth. "Do you know your home address, Christopher?" she asked carefully. The boy shook his head, a fresh tear sliding down his cheek. "Mummy said we were hiding, that Papa couldn't find us, but she got sick, and then—" His voice trailed off, and Emma understood. A more complex situation than she had initially imagined. Perhaps a separation, perhaps something worse. But that could wait until morning. For now the child needed food and rest. She prepared a simple soup with the vegetables she had, watching Christopher devour every spoonful as if he hadn't eaten in days. He probably hadn't. Afterwards, she improvised a bed with her thickest blankets in the warmest corner of the room, next to the small wood-burning stove. "Sleep now," she murmured, brushing the boy's brown hair from his forehead. "Tomorrow we'll figure out how to find your father." Christopher clutched her sleeve with surprising strength. You won't leave? Promise." "I promise I'll be right here finishing my work." Satisfied, the boy finally closed his eyes, his body relaxing into the exhausted sleep of childhood. Emma returned to her sewing, but her hands moved mechanically as her mind buzzed. How had a mother ended up alone and in hiding with the child of one of London's wealthiest men? What circumstances had led to such a situation? Meanwhile, across town, in an imposing mansion in Grosvenor Square, William Ashford stood by his study window, watching the same London night with eyes that hadn't slept in 3 days. 3 days since he had received the anonymous letter, informing him that his estranged wife Margaret was gravely ill somewhere in London. 3 days searching desperately for the son he hadn't seen in 2 years, ever since Margaret had fled with Christopher after the bitter divorce that had scandalized society. He had hired every available investigator, personally scoured every questionable district of the city, offered rewards that would make a duke blush. Nothing. Margaret had always been too clever, always known how to disappear when she wanted, and now perhaps it was too late. William clenched his fists, guilt gnawing at him from within. Would it have been different if he had been less obsessed with business? If he had paid attention to Margaret's pleas for more time together, for a simpler life? But he had argued that he was building an empire for Christopher, for the boy's future, and in the process he had lost both his wife and his son. A sound at the door made him turn. His butler Fletcher entered with a grave expression. "Mr. Ashford, there's news. One of the patrols found a woman's body in Bloomsbury. The description matches Mrs. Margaret. The floor seemed to disappear beneath William's feet. And Christopher? No sign of the young master, sir. Neighbours mentioned seeing a child, but he disappeared before the authorities arrived." William grabbed his coat. "Prepare the carriage. I want every man available searching." He can't have gone far. A child alone, frightened. "I've already given the orders, sir, but London is vast, and if the young master is in hiding, then we'll scour every street, every alley, every damn house if necessary." William's voice echoed through the study, with an intensity that made even the impassive Fletcher take a step back. "He is my son, my only son." In the hours that followed, as Emma finished her work to the soft sound of Christopher's breathing, and as William Ashford mobilized a small army of men to scour London, the city remained indifferent, guarding its secret. A humble seamstress and a powerful magnate, their lives about to intertwine in ways neither could foresee, united by the fate of a small boy who slept innocently, oblivious to the storm his presence would unleash. Emma finally set the finished dress aside as the first rays of sun began to lighten London's grey sky. She looked at Christopher, still deeply asleep, and felt a wave of maternal protection that surprised her with its intensity. She had already decided she would not hand him over to the authorities until she was absolutely certain his father was worthy of him. Some fortunes, she knew well, were built upon foundations of coldness and neglect. Morning arrived shrouded in thick fog, characteristic of London in spring, and Emma woke with a start, realizing she had fallen asleep at her sewing table. Her neck protested as she straightened, massaging her stiff muscles, while her eyes immediately sought the corner where Christopher rested. The boy was still asleep, curled in the blankets like a protective cocoon against a world that had suddenly become too hostile for his tender age. She rose silently, preparing water to wash her face and gather her thoughts. The situation was too delicate for hasty decisions. William Ashford was no ordinary man, and Emma knew that her intervention, however well-intentioned, could be interpreted in countless ways. But how could she simply hand Christopher over without assurances that the boy would be well received and loved? The sound of urgent knocking at the door made her flinch. She looked at Christopher, who was beginning to stir, and then at the entrance. She took a deep breath before opening it, finding Lady Pemberton on the other side, accompanied by her lady's companion, both with expressions of aristocratic impatience. "Miss Hartwell." Lady Pemberton lifted her chin, her ostrich feathers quivering on her elaborate hat. "I've come for my dress. I trust it is ready as promised." "Certainly, your ladyship." Emma curtsied, quickly turning to retrieve the carefully folded garment. But Lady Pemberton had already entered, her sharp eyes scanning the modest room until they landed on Christopher, who was now sitting up, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Who is this child?" The question came laden with suspicion and curiosity. "I wasn't aware you had dependents, Miss Hartwell." Emma felt a blush rise up her neck. "It's a temporary situation, your ladyship. The boy was lost and I—" "Lost?" Lady Pemberton approached, studying Christopher with renewed interest. Her eyes narrowed as she noted the quality of the boy's clothes, even crumpled and dirty. "These are garments too fine for an ordinary orphan. Where did he come from?" I'm still trying to discover that, your ladyship." But Christopher, startled by the imposing presence of the unfamiliar lady, hid behind Emma, clutching her skirt tightly. The gesture did not escape Lady Pemberton's notice, her gaze becoming thoughtful. "I see." She took the dress Emma offered her, examining it thoroughly. Every stitch, every embroidery was scrutinized with critical attention. Finally, she nodded in approval. "Excellent work, as always. However, I must warn you, Miss Hartwell, that harboring a child who clearly belongs to a family of means can bring serious consequences. If he is truly lost, the authorities must be notified." "I understand, your ladyship. I intended to do just that today." Lady Pemberton placed the agreed-upon coins on the table, but before leaving she turned again. "There are rumors circulating through the city. William Ashford is mobilizing half of London searching for his missing son. They say the child's mother passed away, and the boy fled before anyone could reach him." Her eyes slid significantly to Christopher. A boy approximately 5 or 6 years old, brown hair, green eyes, notably similar to the young gentleman hiding behind your skirts. Emma's heart pounded, but she maintained her composure. "I thank you for the information, your ladyship." When the door finally closed, Emma sat down heavily, the weight of the situation crashing down upon her with full force. Christopher watched her with those immense green eyes, full of fear and uncertainty. "Are you hungry?" she asked gently, forcing a reassuring smile. The boy nodded shyly, and Emma prepared simple porridge with the milk she had bought the day before. She watched him eat slowly, his table manners revealing refined upbringing despite the recent trauma. When he finished, she knelt beside him. "Christopher, I need you to tell me more about your mummy. Where did you live?" The boy's eyes filled with tears again. "In a small house, near a big church. Mummy said we had to be quiet, that no one could know we were there. She got very sick, coughing blood." Emma closed her eyes briefly, recognizing the symptoms of consumption. Margaret Ashford probably knew she was dying, which was why she had instructed her son to run if something happened. But why hide? Why keep Christopher away from a father who was apparently searching for him so desperately? "Your father, William Ashford, do you remember him?" Christopher visibly flinched. "Papa was always busy, always shouting at Mummy, saying ugly things. One day Mummy cried a lot and said we had to leave, that we couldn't stay anymore." He hesitated, his voice becoming a whisper. "But I heard her talking to herself before she got very sick. She said maybe it had been her mistake, that maybe Papa wasn't as bad as she had thought." The child's words painted a complex picture. An unhappy marriage, perhaps hastily ended, followed by belated regret. Emma sighed, undecided. She needed more information before making any decision. "Let's do this," she said finally. "You'll stay with me for now, but we need to find out more about your father. If he's a good man, if he can take proper care of you." "And if he isn't?" Christopher's question was so vulnerable, it broke Emma's heart. "Then we'll find another solution. I promise I won't leave you in danger." While Emma and Christopher established their fragile agreement, William Ashford walked the streets of Bloomsbury for the 10th time since dawn. He had identified Margaret's body the previous night, an experience that would haunt him for years to come. She was unrecognizable, consumed by illness and poverty, so different from the vibrant woman he had married 10 years prior. Guilt was a physical weight in his chest. He had closed her eyes personally, murmuring apologies that came too late, promises he could never fulfill. But Christopher was still out there somewhere, frightened and alone, and William wouldn't rest until he found him. Mr. Ashford, his chief investigator, a lean man named Cornelius Webb, approached with a cautious expression. "We have a possible report. A washerwoman living near Mrs. Margaret's residence mentioned seeing a woman taking a boy to her home in Mayfair last night, described him as well-dressed, crying." William gripped the investigator's arm tightly. Where? Which address? Bruton Street, sir. But... Webb hesitated. The woman is known in the area. Emma Hartwell, a seamstress. An impeccable reputation, never caused trouble. Perhaps she merely offered temporary shelter. I don't care if she's the Queen herself, I want my son back. William was already striding towards his carriage. Gather the men. We're going there immediately. Sir, may I suggest caution? If it is truly the young master, an aggressive approach might frighten him further. He hasn't seen you in 2 years, and certainly Mrs. Margaret. William stopped abruptly, turning to face Webb. Certainly Margaret what? Poisoned him against me? Told him his father was a monster? Webb held his gaze. With all due respect, sir, your marriage to Mrs. Margaret was tumultuous. The arguments were known among the servants. It wouldn't be surprising if the young master held difficult memories. The truth of the words hit William like a punch. He remembered the quarrels, the broken plates, Margaret's tears pleading for attention he never had time to give. He remembered Christopher hiding behind the curtains, his eyes wide with fear as his parents destroyed what remained of their marriage. "So what do you suggest?" he asked, his voice suddenly weary. "A gentle approach. Go alone. Without intimidation. If Miss Hartwell truly took him in, she likely has good intentions. Win her trust first, and consequently, the boys." William nodded slowly, recognizing the wisdom of the advice. But every fiber of his being cried out to simply storm that house and reclaim his son. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm. "Very well, but if there is any indication that Christopher is in danger, then we will act immediately, sir. You have my word." Hours later, Emma was teaching Christopher a simple stitch, watching the intense concentration on his small face as he tried to imitate her movements when knocking sounded at the door. Firm, authoritative knocks, completely different from Lady Pemberton's in the morning. She looked at Christopher, whose face had instantly paled. "Stay here," she whispered, guiding him towards the back room. "Don't make a sound." When she opened the door, Emma found herself face to face with a man whose presence dominated the entire space around him. Tall, broad-shouldered beneath a perfectly tailored coat, black hair lightly streaked with grey at the temples, and eyes the same emerald green as Christopher's. There was no doubt as to who stood at her door. "Miss Hartwell." The voice was deep, controlled, but Emma detected the underlying tension. "My name is William Ashford. I believe you have something that belongs to me." The silence that followed William Ashford's words felt solid enough to cut. Emma gripped the doorknob firmly, her heart hammering against her ribs as she studied the man before her. He was exactly as she imagined a London magnate would be, imposing, impeccably dressed, with an aura of authority that likely bent wills stronger than hers. But there was something else in his green eyes, something she recognized from the previous night, ill-contained despair. "Mr. Ashford," she replied carefully, refusing to retreat a single step. "Children are not possessions that belong to anyone. They are human beings who deserve care and protection." His eyes narrowed slightly, but Emma detected surprise in his reaction. He was likely unaccustomed to being contradicted, especially not by a Mayfair seamstress. William took a deep breath, visibly striving to maintain his composure. "You are right, of course," he said, and Emma noticed the almost imperceptible tremor in his voice. "Forgive my rudeness. I have been searching for my son, Christopher, for 3 days. A 6-year-old boy, brown hair, green eyes. He was seen being brought to this residence on the night his mother passed away. The mention of Margaret's death was like a physical blow. Emma had seen Christopher's suffering, heard his trembling words about the mother who hadn't woken up again, but hearing it confirmed from William Ashford's lips made it terribly real and final. "I am very sorry for your loss, sir," she said sincerely, "but you must understand that I cannot simply hand over a frightened child to a stranger, even if that stranger claims to be his father." William's jaw tightened. "Claims? Do you doubt my word, miss?" "I do not doubt your identity, Mr. Ashford. I doubt your intentions." Emma raised her chin, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Christopher is traumatized. He lost his mother in a terrible way, endured cold and hunger alone in the streets. He needs kindness and security, not to be dragged about like forgotten luggage." William recoiled as if slapped. Colour rose up his neck, and for a moment Emma thought she had gone too far. But then he closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, there was something different in them. Vulnerability. "You are correct," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I have been many things in life, but a present father was not among them. Margaret knew that. That is why she left me." He looked at the floor, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "But he is my son, my only son, and I need a chance to correct my mistakes." Emma felt her resolve waver. There was truth in his words, genuine pain that resonated with her own experience of loss. She had lost her parents too young, grown up without ever having the chance for reconciliation. Would it be fair to deny that to Christopher and William? "Come in," she said, finally opening the door, "but on one condition. You will allow me to be present. Christopher is terrified, and he needs someone he trusts." William hesitated on the threshold, clearly unaccustomed to conditions imposed by others, but he nodded, entering the modest apartment carefully so as not to knock anything over with his imposing stature. His eyes swept over the room, pausing on the neatly arranged fabrics, the sewing table, the skillful patches that tried to disguise the age of the curtains. "Christopher," Emma called softly towards the back room, "there's someone here who would like to see you." The silence that followed seemed endless. Then, very slowly, the door opened and Christopher appeared, his small fingers clutching the doorframe. When his eyes landed on William, the boy paled to the lips. "Papa." The word came out as a frightened whisper, and Emma watched William Ashford, the powerful magnate who commanded commercial empires, collapse. He fell to his knees right there, in the middle of the room, tears streaming freely down his face. "Christopher, my boy, my son." The words came out choked, broken by emotion. "Forgive me. Please, forgive me." Christopher remained motionless, torn between the impulse to run into his father's arms and the fear of everything that had happened in recent days. Emma knelt beside him, gently touching his shoulder. "It's all right," she murmured. "You don't have to decide anything now." But Christopher took a hesitant step forward, then another. William remained kneeling, not daring to move, as if he feared any action might frighten his son away. When Christopher finally reached him, he stood before him, studying his tear-stained face with childlike curiosity. "You're crying," the boy observed, wonderingly. "Yes," William didn't try to hide or wipe away the tears, "because I was so afraid. Afraid of having lost you forever. Afraid of never being able to say how sorry I am." "Mummy said you didn't love us." Christopher's voice was small but firm. "That you only loved your work and your money." Emma watched William swallow hard, the pain of those words evident in every line of his face. He didn't deny it, didn't try to justify. Instead, he simply nodded. "Your mother was right, I was a fool. I thought building a fortune was the same as building a home, that working incessantly was showing love. But I was wrong, Christopher. So terribly wrong." He extended his hands, palms up, supplicating, "I cannot change the past. I cannot give you back your mother or the years we lost. But I can promise that if you give me a chance, I will be the father you deserve. The father I always should have been." Christopher looked at Emma, seeking guidance. She smiled encouragingly, though her own heart was heavy. The boy then turned his attention back to William, and very slowly placed his small hand in his father's. "You promise you won't shout?" "I promise." "And you won't leave and abandon me?" "Never again, you have my word of honor." Christopher studied his father's face for a long moment, searching for lies or falseness. Apparently satisfied with what he saw, he finally allowed himself to be pulled into an embrace. William enveloped his son with reverent care, as if holding something infinitely precious and fragile. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as he buried his face in the boy's hair. Emma discreetly stepped away, giving them privacy, but not before seeing the transformation in both of them. Christopher, who had been so frightened and lost, was beginning to relax in his father's arms. And William, the imposing magnate, seemed to have finally found something more valuable than all his riches: redemption. She prepared tea while father and son remained embraced, her own tears threatening to fall. There was beauty in that moment of reconciliation, but also sadness for the woman who had not lived to witness it. Margaret had spent her last years in flight and hiding, perhaps regretting decisions made in moments of anger and hurt. "Miss Hartwell," William's voice made her turn. He was standing now, Christopher clutching his hand, both with red eyes but lighter expressions. "I can never thank you adequately for caring for my son when I could not. You offered him safety and kindness at the moment he needed it most." Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. William continued, choosing his words carefully. "Christopher told me that you promised not to abandon him in danger, that you would protect him until you were certain his father was worthy of him." He paused, emotion transparent on his face. "I would like to ask you to keep that promise." Emma blinked, confused. "I don't understand, Mr. Ashford." "Come with us. To my residence." He raised a hand when she began to protest. "Not as a servant. Christopher needs time to adapt, to learn to trust me again. Your presence would facilitate this transition, and I—" He hesitated, vulnerability crossing his features. "I need to learn how to be a father. I fear failing again, making the same mistakes. Perhaps you can help me avoid that." "Mr. Ashford, that would be highly irregular. An unmarried woman residing with a widower." "Then we will call you Christopher's governess, tutor, any title that protects your reputation." William stepped forward, pleading in his eyes. "Please, not for my sake, but for his. He trusts you in a way he doesn't trust me. Not yet." Emma looked at Christopher, who watched the exchange intently. The boy nodded shyly, hope shining in his green eyes. "Would you come, Miss Emma? Please?" How could she refuse? Emma thought of her modest apartment, of the commissions that barely paid the rent, of the loneliness that accompanied her every night. But more than that, she thought of the boy who had stolen her heart in just one night, and of the father who genuinely seemed to want to change. "Very well," she agreed finally, "but only temporarily, until Christopher is settled." The smile that illuminated William's face transformed him completely, revealing the man who had likely existed before ambition and work consumed his humanity. Christopher let out a cry of joy, jumping with excitement. As they made arrangements for the move, neither of them could foresee how that decision would change their lives forever. Emma had agreed to care for a lost boy, but she would end up finding something she had deemed impossible, a family. And William, who had sought to reclaim his son, would discover that sometimes redemption comes with unexpected gifts. The mansion in Grosvenor Square stood as a monument to William Ashford's success, its white columns reflecting the morning sun as the carriage passed through the iron gates. Emma watched from the window, her fingers nervously intertwined in her lap as she absorbed the magnitude of what she had accepted. Christopher pressed against her side, small and silent, since they had left the Mayfair apartment, as if the reality of the situation was finally beginning to sink in. William occupied the opposite seat, his eyes alternating between his son and the woman who had saved the child. He had not spoken since they departed, but Emma felt the weight of his attention, the intensity of emotions he could barely contain. When the carriage finally stopped before the main entrance, he descended first, extending a hand to help her. "Welcome to your new residence, Miss Hartwell," he said formally, but there was genuine warmth in his voice. A row of servants waited in the marble vestibule, their expressions carefully neutral, as they studied the modestly dressed woman who descended from the carriage beside their master. Emma felt a blush rise up her neck under their scrutiny, but she kept her head held high. She would not allow them to intimidate her, not when Christopher needed her. "Mrs. Daventry." William addressed a robust, middle-aged woman whose rigid posture screamed domestic authority. "This is Miss Emma Hartwell, Christopher's new governess and tutor. She will have the rooms on the second floor, next to the boy's bedroom, and her orders are to be followed as if they were my own." The governess's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, but she curtsied. "As you wish, Mr. Ashford." Emma immediately sensed the underlying tension. The servants clearly disapproved of the irregular situation, a stranger brought in so abruptly. She didn't blame them, but she also had no energy to worry about it now. Christopher gripped her hand with a force that would make her fingers ache later, and his needs superseded any discomfort she might feel. "If you'll accompany me, Mrs. Daventry indicated the stairs with a sharp gesture. "I'll show you to your quarters." William lightly touched Emma's shoulder before she turned away. "Join me in my study after you've settled in. We need to discuss arrangements for Christopher." She nodded, allowing the housekeeper to guide them up the stairs. The corridors were wide and elegant, adorned with paintings that likely cost more than everything Emma had ever owned in her life. Persian rugs cushioned their footsteps, and crystal chandeliers hung from the ornate ceilings. It was a world completely distant from her modest apartment. "These will be the young master's chambers." Mrs. Daventry opened a door revealing a room that took Emma's breath away. Light blue and gold dominated the space, with a four-poster bed too grand for a child, shelves laden with untouched toys, and windows offering views of the expansive gardens. Everything looked new, as if it had been awaiting its occupant for a long time. Christopher released Emma's hand and stepped in slowly, his fingers gliding reverently over the polished furniture. "I remember this room," he murmured, his voice small in the spacious room. "But it was empty before Mommy and I left before they finished decorating it." Emma felt her heart clench, imagining William preparing that sanctuary for a son who had vanished before he could enjoy it. How many nights had the man spent gazing at that empty room, wondering if Christopher would ever occupy it? "Your quarters are contiguous." Mrs. Daventry opened a side door, revealing a smaller but equally well-appointed room in soft shades of green and cream. "Mr. Ashford insisted you stay close to the boy." "Thank you," Emma said sincerely, touched by the consideration. The housekeeper hesitated, her stern expression softening marginally. "The master has been different since young Christopher disappeared. He didn't sleep, barely ate. I've never seen him so affected." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If you truly have the boy's best interests at heart, as you appear to, then perhaps your presence here will be beneficial." It was a reluctant concession, but Emma appreciated it. "I'll do everything in my power to help Christopher adjust." After Mrs. Daventry withdrew, Emma briefly explored her new quarters before returning to Christopher's room. She found him sitting by the window, watching the gardens with a melancholic expression that shouldn't belong to a child. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently, sitting beside him. "Mommy would have liked these gardens," he replied, his voice trembling. "She always said she wanted a garden where we could plant flowers together." Emma wrapped him in a protective embrace, letting him cry against her shoulder. "Your mother loved you very much, Christopher. Everything she did was to protect you. But she left, and left me alone. Not by her own choice, my dear. Sometimes people leave even when they desperately want to stay." Emma pulled him back slightly to look him in the eyes. "But you're not alone now. You have your father, who clearly loves you very much, and you have me. I promise I won't go anywhere as long as you need me." Christopher hugged her fiercely, and Emma allowed herself to close her eyes, sending a silent prayer that she would be able to keep that promise. An hour later, Emma descended to William's study, Christopher asleep after the morning's emotional exhaustion. She found him standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, tension evident in his rigid shoulders. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and Emma was surprised to see raw vulnerability on his face. "How is he?" William asked immediately. "Sleeping. It was a difficult morning for him." Emma accepted the seat he offered, watching him pull up a nearby chair instead of positioning himself behind his imposing mahogany desk. The gesture touched her, suggesting he genuinely wanted equality in their conversation. "I thank you again for agreeing to come," William began, his voice laden with emotion. "I know this is irregular, potentially damaging to your reputation." "My reputation will survive," Emma interrupted. "I'm more concerned with Christopher's well-being." William nodded, something like admiration crossing his features. "He is lucky to have found you, or perhaps it was divine providence." He paused, visibly struggling with his next words. "I need you to understand the situation with Margaret. Our marriage was a mistake from the start. Not on my part, at least not initially. I loved her, but I was so consumed by ambition, so determined to build my empire, that I neglected what truly mattered." Emma remained silent, allowing him to continue. "Margaret tried. For years, She tried to reach me through the walls I built around myself, but each failed attempt pushed her further away. Arguments became more frequent, more bitter. Christopher witnessed things no child should ever witness. Deep pain marked every word. When she finally left, taking him with her, part of me was relieved. I wouldn't have to confront my failures daily anymore. What kind of man thinks like that about losing his family? A wounded man, Emma said gently, a man who didn't know how to deal with his own pain. William looked up at her, surprise evident. You are too generous. I'm not generous, I'm realistic. We all make mistakes, Mr. Ashford. What defines us is how we choose to proceed after acknowledging them. He stood abruptly, walking to the unlit fireplace. For 2 years I searched for them. I hired investigators, offered rewards, used every resource at my disposal. But Margaret was always too clever. She managed to stay hidden no matter what I did. His voice broke. If only I had known she was ill, that she didn't have adequate resources. She didn't want to be found, Emma said softly. Not until she was ready, if she ever would be. Blaming yourself won't change that. William turned to face her, tears glistening in his eyes. How can I not blame myself? My wife died in destitution. My son endured cold and hunger in the streets, all because I was too foolish to see what truly mattered, until it was too late. Emma approached him, unexpected courage guiding her actions. She lightly touched his arm, making him look down. The past cannot be changed, Mr. Ashford, but the future is still being written. Christopher needs a father who is present, who listens to him, who puts him before business and fortunes. Can you be that man? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. William covered her hand with his, the touch sending unexpected warmth through Emma's arm. With your help, he said intensely. I believe I can. Teach me, Miss Hartwell. Teach me to be the father Christopher deserves. Emma found herself lost in those green eyes, seeing beyond the powerful magnate to the broken man trying to rebuild himself. Something was happening there, something that transcended their original arrangement. But she pushed the thought away, focusing on what truly mattered. Very well, she agreed, gently withdrawing her hand. But you must be prepared for true changes, not just empty words. Christopher will need your time, your attention, your unconditional love. He will have all that and more, William promised. You have my word. And watching the determination on his face, Emma believed him. The following days unfolded in a succession of small miracles and delicate adjustments. Emma woke before dawn, an ingrained habit from her years as a seamstress, but now found unexpected comfort in the softness of linen sheets and the respectful silence of the still-sleeping mansion. Christopher came to her room every morning, knocking shyly before entering, his green eyes seeking confirmation that she was still there, that it hadn't just been a dream. William had also drastically changed his habits. The man who once spent 16 hours a day in his study now limited himself to 4 or 5, dedicating the rest of his time to rebuilding his relationship with his son. Emma watched them in the garden during the afternoons, William kneeling on the immaculate grass, while Christopher excitedly explained some imaginary game, and she felt something warm in her chest, something dangerous and inopportune that she refused to name. On a particularly mild afternoon, Emma was in the music room teaching Christopher how to hold the violin bow correctly when William entered, bringing with him the scent of leather and fresh ink from the documents he had been reviewing. He paused at the entrance, observing the scene with an expression Emma couldn't fully decipher. "Do you play?" he asked, addressing her as Christopher valiantly struggled with the unruly strings. "A little. My mother insisted I learn before she passed away." Emma adjusted Christopher's small fingers on the strings. Nothing comparable to a professional musician, but enough to teach the basics. William approached, his boots echoing softly on the parquet floor. "I didn't know you had that skill. What else does Miss Hartwell hide from us?" There was something in the question, a tone that made Emma look up. She found him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race alarmingly. She quickly averted her eyes, focusing again on Christopher. "There's little to hide, Mr. Ashford. My life has always been quite simple." "Simplicity can be deceiving," he murmured, but did not elaborate, turning his attention to his son. "Christopher, how about we show Miss Emma the summer pavilion? I believe she would appreciate the gardens this afternoon." Christopher instantly lit up, putting the violin aside with thinly veiled relief. "Oh yes, Miss Emma, there's a lake with swans and a stone bridge where we can feed them." Emma allowed herself to be guided by the two through the expansive gardens, Christopher bouncing excitedly ahead, while William walked beside her, their hands occasionally brushing when the path narrowed. Each accidental touch sent waves of awareness through her, making her question the wisdom of having accepted that arrangement. The pavilion proved to be an elegant structure of white stone and Greek columns, surrounded by rose bushes that were beginning to bloom despite the still early season. Christopher immediately ran to the edge of the lake, where swans glided gracefully, and William seized the moment of relative privacy. "I need to confess something," he said, his voice low and serious. Emma turned to face him, instant concern clutching her chest. "When I brought you here, I told myself it was just for Christopher's sake, that your presence would ease his transition." "Yes," Emma agreed cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I was lying, to myself at least." William turned completely to her, the vulnerability on his face making her forget to breathe. "From that first moment at your door when you faced me fearlessly despite our difference in station, something changed. You made me see who I had become, and more importantly, who I could be." "Mr. Ashford," Emma began, but he gently raised his hand. "William, please call me William when we're in private." "This isn't appropriate," she protested weakly, though her heart sang with every word he spoke. "You are a magnate, a man of possessions and influence. I am just a seamstress. You are much more than that." William took a step forward, reducing the space between them to mere inches. Emma could feel the warmth emanating from him, see the golden flecks in his green eyes. "You are the woman who saved my son, who taught me the true meaning of courage and compassion, who transformed our house into a true home for the first time since Margaret left." "Christopher needs stability," Emma argued, desperate to maintain some sanity in the situation. "Not romantic complications confusing things." What if it wasn't a complication? What if it was exactly what all of us needed? Before Emma could answer, Christopher called them enthusiastically, waving a piece of bread he had managed to persuade a servant to provide him with. William stepped back, but not before whispering, "Think about what I said, please." The rest of the afternoon passed in a surreal haze. Emma participated in Christopher's games, laughed at his stories, but her mind remained fixated on those words. Could it be possible? Could a man like William Ashford genuinely have feelings for her? And even more terrifying, what did the rapid beats of her own heart signify? The warmth that invaded her whenever he entered a room. That night, after putting Christopher to bed, Emma remained by her bedroom window, watching the stars over London. She had come to that house with a clear purpose, to help a traumatized boy adapt. She hadn't counted on his father, on the way he made her feel seen and valued in ways no one ever had. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Daventry with some domestic question. But it was William who crossed the threshold, stopping respectfully at the entrance. "Forgive the intrusion," he said. "I saw a light under your door and imagined you were still awake." "Is something wrong with Christopher?" Emma asked immediately, instant maternal concern. "No, he sleeps soundly. I came." William hesitated, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "I came because I couldn't sleep without clarifying what I said earlier. I don't want you to think I'm being rash or insensitive regarding Margaret's memory." Emma approached him, courage finding her in the shadows. "What do you feel for me, William?" Using his given name felt natural, intimately so, making her blush. "Admiration," he replied immediately. "Deep respect. Gratitude that transcends words." He paused, searching for suitable terms. "And something more. Something I haven't felt in a very long time. Something that frightens me by its intensity. You've only known me a few days," Emma pointed out, though her heart leaped at the confession. "Days that have taught me more about what truly matters than years of accumulating wealth." William took another step, his hands finding hers. "I'm not asking for immediate decisions. I'm not demanding a reciprocation of feelings. I merely ask for permission to explore this connection, to see where it might lead us. Emma looked at their clasped hands, so different in size and texture, yet fitting together perfectly. She thought of her life before, the lonely night sewing until her hands bled, the certainty that she would die alone and forgotten. Then she thought of Christopher, of how she loved him as if he were her own son. And finally she thought of William, the broken man she had found at her apartment door, and the renewed man who stood before her now. "I'm afraid," she admitted in a low voice. "Afraid of not being enough, of not belonging in this world." "You already belong," William insisted, his hands gently squeezing hers. "Christopher chose you and I—" He swallowed hard. "I'm dangerously close to doing the same." The moment stretched between them, laden with possibilities and dangers. Emma knew she should pull back, maintain appropriate professional distance, but her heart, so long dormant, refused to obey reason. "Very well," she whispered finally. "We will explore this. But slowly, and always with Christopher first." The smile that lit William's face stole her breath. He raised her hands, pressing reverent kisses to her knuckles, a courteous but intimate gesture that made her tremble. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. "I promise to be worthy of your trust." After he left, Emma sat on her bed, heart racing and mind swirling. She had crossed some invisible line that night, allowing herself to consider possibilities that had once seemed absurd. A magnate and a seamstress, united by love for a small boy and by something more that neither of them dared to fully name yet. Outside, London slept indifferently, but within that mansion in Grosvenor Square, 3 lives intertwined in ways that would reshape all their futures. Emma finally fell asleep with a smile on her lips, dreaming of possibilities she had once deemed impossible, allowing herself for the first time in years to believe that perhaps she deserved happiness too. The following week brought with it a routine Emma had never imagined possible. Mornings began with Christopher invading her room, still in his nightshirt, to drag her down to breakfast where William already awaited them. The magnate had completely abandoned the habit of taking hurried meals in his study, preferring those precious hours with his son and with the woman who, slowly, was becoming indispensable to them both. But the fragile peace they were building would face its first true test on a Thursday afternoon, when Lady Pemberton's carriage unexpectedly appeared at the mansion gates. Emma was in the garden with Christopher, teaching him to identify different types of roses, when Mrs. Daventry approached with a worried expression. "Miss Hartwell, Lady Pemberton requests an audience. Should I inform Mr. Ashford?" Emma felt her blood run cold. The aristocrat knew her previous situation. She knew she was just a modest seamstress. Her presence here could ignite exactly the kind of scandal Emma feared. "No," she replied, rising and brushing dirt from her skirts. "I will receive her in the blue drawing room. Christopher, dear, why don't you go find your father? I'm sure he'd love to hear about the roses you learned about today." The boy left cheerfully. Oblivious to the tension that suddenly permeated the air, Emma took a deep breath, smoothing her hair and straightening her posture before entering the house. She found Lady Pemberton examining a piece of Chinese porcelain with critical interest, her feathers bobbing with each tilt of her head. "Lady Pemberton," Emma curtsied respectfully. "What a pleasant surprise." "Pleasant?" The older woman turned, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow. "I imagine it's anything but pleasant, Miss Hartwell. Or should I call you something else now? I've heard most interesting rumors about a Mayfair seamstress who suddenly became a governess to William Ashford's son." Emma maintained her composure, though she felt her cheeks flush. "There is nothing improper in the situation. Your ladyship, young Christopher needed care during a difficult period of transition." "Transition," Lady Pemberton repeated the word with clear irony. "It's a delicate way to describe a child found crying in the streets after his mother's death." She moved closer, studying Emma with disconcerting intensity. "But I didn't come here to judge you, my dear. I came to warn you." "Warn me?" "London society is cruel to those who defy its conventions. A single woman residing with a wealthy and attractive widower." Lady Pemberton shook her head. "The rumors have already begun. They say you seduced Ashford through the child, that you are an unscrupulous opportunist trying to secure a position above your station." Each word was like a knife, but Emma refused to show weakness. And your ladyship believes these rumours? I, Lady Pemberton let out a dry laugh. I watched you work yourself to exhaustion for paltry pay, sewing with bleeding fingers because you couldn't refuse orders. I saw your integrity in every careful stitch, your dignity even in poverty. She paused meaningfully. No, I don't believe you are an opportunist, but others will believe it, and that can destroy both you and the boy. Emma sank heavily into a chair, the weight of the words finally penetrating her defenses. What do you suggest I do? Marry or leave? The answer came without equivocation. There is no middle ground in society. Your presence here will only be tolerated if there is a formal commitment or if you disappear completely from their lives. Christopher needs me, Emma protested weakly. He's just starting to recover from the trauma. And William Ashford? Does he need you too? The question hit Emma full force. She thought of the nightly conversations they shared after Christopher fell asleep, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't noticing, the accidental touches that became more frequent and less accidental each day. I don't know, she finally admitted, honesty breaking through her defenses. Lady Pemberton sat beside her, her expression softening unexpectedly. My dear, I am old enough to recognize true love when I see it, and I saw it in that man's eyes when I mentioned your name upon my arrival. He loves you, even if he's too foolish to admit it aloud. But I'm just a seamstress, Emma whispered, her voice breaking. He's a magnate, a man of influence and fortune. How could it work? Love rarely concerns itself with social conventions. It's society that worries, and society can be unforgiving. Lady Pemberton rose, preparing to leave. Think about what I said, but don't delay too long, or the decision will be made for you through the scandal that will surely come. After the aristocrat's departure, Emma remained seated in the blue drawing-room, her mind swirling. Marry William? The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. But would it be fair to him? To Christopher? What if her feelings were merely gratitude confused with something deeper? Emma? William's voice startled her. He was in the doorway, Christopher at his side, both with worried expressions. Mrs. Daventry mentioned Lady Pemberton was here. Is everything all right? Emma forced a reassuring smile. Perfectly fine. She merely came to check how I'm settling in. But William knew her too well already. He sent Christopher to fetch a book from his room and approached her, kneeling to meet her eyes. Don't lie to me, please. What did she say? Emma averted her gaze, unable to face those green eyes so like Christopher's. The truth, that our situation is untenable, that rumors are beginning to circulate. What kind of rumors? William's voice had become dangerously low. That I'm an opportunist, that I seduced you through your son. The words came out bitterly, that I'm trying to elevate myself above my station. William let out an expletive that made Emma's eyes widen. He rose abruptly, beginning to pace back and forth with contained energy. Fools, all of them. How dare they judge without knowing the facts, without understanding what you've done for us? He stopped, turning to her with fierce intensity. Then we will silence the rumors. How? By marrying me. The silence that followed was absolute. Emma was sure she had misheard, that her heart had finally gone mad and started imagining impossible things. But William remained there, looking at her with determination and something more, something that made her heart beat dangerously fast. You can't be serious, she finally managed to say. I've never been more serious in my life. William approached again, taking her hands. I know it's rash. I know we haven't had a proper courtship, but I also know that I cannot imagine my life, Christopher's life, without you in it. William. Emma tried to find words, anything that would make sense of the chaos in her mind. Are you offering me marriage for convenience, to silence rumors? No. The word came out with absolute force. I am offering marriage because I want you, because I wake up every morning eager to see you, because your laughter lights up this house in ways no fortune could buy, because when Christopher calls you Miss Emma, I hear mother in every syllable and my heart sings with the possibility. Tears streamed down Emma's face now, uncontrollable. What if I'm not enough? What if I disappoint you, Christopher, everyone who depends on me? William pulled her into his arms, embracing her with a gentleness that contrasted with his physical strength. "Impossible. You have already given us more than we could ever dream of. Are you just willing to give a little more, to make permanent what my heart already considers irreversible?" Emma buried her face in his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his embrace. She thought of her life before, the loneliness that consumed her, the endless nights sewing until her hands bled. Then she thought of the present, the mornings with Christopher, the conversations with William, the feeling of belonging that had blossomed in her heart. "Yes," she whispered against the thin fabric of his shirt. "Yes, I will marry you." She felt more than heard William's sigh of relief. He drew her back just enough to look her in the eyes, his hands framing her face with reverence. "I will make you happy," he promised solemnly. "I will spend every day of the rest of my life ensuring you never regret this decision." Before Emma could respond, enthusiastic footsteps announced Christopher's return. The boy paused at the entrance, looking between the two embracing adults with obvious curiosity. "Are you okay?" he asked hesitantly. William extended his arm, inviting him to join them. "Better than okay, my son. Miss Emma has agreed to become a permanent part of our family. How do you feel about that?" Christopher's face transformed completely, pure joy illuminating his features. He ran to them, throwing himself into both their arms with a force that almost knocked them over. "Does that mean you'll be my mommy? For real?" Emma hugged him fiercely, fresh tears falling. "If you'll accept me as such—" "I accept! I accept!" Christopher was jumping now, his happiness contagious. "Can we tell everyone? Can I tell Mrs. Daventry and the gardener?" William laughed, a rich, genuine sound Emma rarely heard. "You can tell the whole world if you wish." As Christopher ran off to spread the news, Emma and William remained embraced, savouring the moment. She knew challenges would come, that London society would not easily accept a seamstress as a magnate's wife. But looking into William's green eyes, seeing the love and determination reflected there, Emma allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, love was enough to overcome any obstacle. "I don't have a ring to offer you yet," William murmured, kissing her forehead gently. "But tomorrow we will visit the finest jeweller in London. You will have something worthy of your beauty." "I don't need expensive jewelry," Emma protested. "I just need you and Christopher. And you will have us, always." William finally leaned in, his lips finding hers in a kiss that sealed promises more binding than any contract. A kiss that promised not only love but partnership, respect, and a future built together. When they finally separated, both breathless, Emma knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. It didn't matter what society said, what scandals they tried to create. She had found her home, not within the walls of the mansion, but in the hearts of the man and the boy who had chosen her just as much as she had chosen them. And on that London afternoon, as Christopher spread news of joy through the house, and the servants whispered in surprise, Emma Hartwell finally allowed herself to believe the impossible, that fairy tales sometimes came true. The engagement announcement spread through London like wildfire. In less than 48 hours, every aristocratic salon buzzed with speculation about the seamstress who had captured William Ashford's heart. Emma felt the weight of gazes whenever she left the mansion, the whispers that abruptly ceased when she entered a shop, the cutting coldness of ladies who had once treated her with cordial indifference. But William remained unwavering by her side, his constant presence a shield against others' malice. He had taken her to the most prestigious jeweller on Bond Street, where they chose together a sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds, the blue stone reminding Emma of the calm waters she had rarely witnessed but always imagined. As he slid the ring onto her finger right there in the shop under the jeweller's disapproving gaze, Emma felt something cement between them, something stronger than promises or social conventions. Christopher was completely transformed. The frightened boy she had found crying in the street had given way to a vibrant child who ran through the gardens with joyful abandon, his laughter echoing through the mansion's rooms like music. He insisted on calling Emma mother now, testing the word with obvious delight, and each time he did, her heart swelled until it ached. 3 weeks after their engagement, during an intimate dinner they shared in the private dining room, William surprised Emma by placing a thick envelope beside her plate. She looked at him questioningly, but he simply gestured for her to open it. Inside, she found legal documents meticulously crafted in impeccable calligraphy. It took her a few moments to comprehend the contents, and when she did, tears sprang instantly to her eyes. "You're giving me ownership of the building where my apartment used to be," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "The entire building," William confirmed calmly. "I thought you might transform it into something useful. Perhaps workshops for women who need dignified work, or affordable residences for working families." He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. "Or you could simply sell it if you prefer. It's yours to do with as you wish." Emma clutched the documents to her chest, understanding the true significance of the gift. It wasn't just generosity. It was recognition of her independence, validation of her ability to make her own decisions, even within her new privileged status. "I want to create a workshop," she said slowly, the idea forming as she spoke. "A place where women can learn trades, earn fair wages, and have the security I rarely had. But I'll need your guidance on the practical aspects." William's smile lit up his entire face. "It will be my pleasure to assist you, though I suspect you'll need little help from me. You've always been wiser than I in matters that truly count." But the peace they were building would be severely tested a few days later, when Margaret, Lady Whitmore, one of the most influential women in London society, hosted a charity tea to which Emma had been specifically invited. William had warned her of the obvious trap, but Emma refused to back down. She needed to face society eventually. Better to do so now with courage than allow fear to govern her. Lady Whitmore's drawing room was exactly as Emma had imagined, opulent to excess, with crimson velvet drapes and gilt furniture that screamed wealth. 24 aristocratic ladies occupied the strategically placed sofas, all turning to observe her when she was announced. Emma held her head high, silently grateful for the fine gowns William had insisted on commissioning for her. She wore dark green silk that complemented her eyes, modest in cut but impeccably elegant. She would not give them additional ammunition through inappropriate attire. "Miss Hartwell?" Lady Whitmore approached with a smile that did not reach her cold eyes. "What an honor to receive the future Mrs. Ashford in my humble home." "The honor is mine, Lady Whitmore," Emma replied, with the precise reverence etiquette demanded. Neither too much, suggesting subservience, nor too little, implying arrogance. The tea proceeded with superficial conversations about weather and fashion, but Emma felt the tension building like a distant storm. Finally, Lady Whitmore addressed the inevitable subject. "You must tell us how you captured Mr. Ashford's heart. It's such an unusual story." All conversations ceased. The silence was absolute, expectant. Emma placed her teacup delicately before replying. "There was no deliberate conquest. I simply found a child in need and offered what I could. The rest developed naturally." "How convenient," murmured another lady, Lady Hertford, known for her sharp tongue. "A poor seamstress just happens to find the missing son of one of London's wealthiest men. Some would say divine providence seems remarkably timely." Emma felt a blush creep up her neck, but forced herself to remain calm. To lose her composure would be precisely what they expected. "Some would say," she agreed softly, "that judging without knowing the full circumstances reveals more about the character of the judge than of the judged." Shocked whispers rippled through the drawing room. No one dared to confront Lady Hertford so directly, but Emma continued, her voice steady. "I did not seek wealth or position. I offered shelter to a frightened child because it was the right thing to do. If that offends aristocratic sensibilities, I sincerely regret it. But I will not apologize for compassion." Lady Whitmore leaned forward slightly, genuine interest replacing her calculated coolness. "And love? Do you claim to love William Ashford, or is it merely convenient gratitude?" The question cut deeper than the others, forcing Emma to confront truths she had barely begun to admit to herself. She thought of the late-night conversations they shared, of the way her heart quickened when he entered a room, of the sense of completeness she experienced in his presence. "I love him," she said simply, allowing the truth to resonate in every word. "I love his dedication to righting past wrongs. I love how he kneels on the floor to play with Christopher. I love his vulnerability when he thinks no one is watching. and his strength when he protects those he loves. She met the eyes of every woman present. If that is not worthy of respect in your eyes, then I do not desire such respect. The silence that followed was different now. Emma saw some expressions soften, others remain hard, but all contained something new, an acknowledgement that she would not be easily intimidated or dismissed. Lady Whitmore finally nodded, something akin to reluctant approval on her face. Perhaps William Ashford has chosen more wisely than we imagined. The rest of the tea proceeded with a marginally more cordial atmosphere. Emma had not made friends, but she had established herself as a force to be reckoned with. When she finally returned to the mansion in Grosvenor Square, she found William pacing anxiously in the vestibule. "How did it go?" he asked immediately, studying her face for any signs of distress. "I survived," she replied with a tired smile, and perhaps even earned some grudging respect. William pulled her into his arms, holding her fiercely. "I'm so sorry for exposing you to that. If there were another way—" "There isn't," Emma interrupted, pulling back to look into his eyes. "This is the world we live in, but we will face it together as we promised." He kissed her then, gently but deeply, pouring into the kiss everything words could not express. When they separated, Christopher appeared at the top of the stairs, watching them with a knowing smile beyond his years. "You're kissing again," he observed with feigned exasperation. "Mrs. Daventry says I'll have to get used to it." Emma laughed, a free, joyful sound that echoed through the vestibule. "I'm afraid so, my dear." The following days brought preparations for the wedding. Emma had initially suggested a simple ceremony, but William had insisted on a proper celebration, not for ostentation, but because he wished to publicly declare his commitment. They reached a compromise, a ceremony in the chapel of William's country estate in Surrey, with only close family and true friends present. Lady Pemberton proved an unexpected ally, offering to help Emma with preparations and navigating social complexities. During a visit to discuss gowns, the elder aristocrat made an observation that would stay with Emma forever. "Do you know why I truly approved of your marriage?" she asked, studying Emma with discerning eyes. "Because you remind William that wealth without humanity is a worse kind of poverty. You have made him whole again." The words touched Emma deeply, validating choices that sometimes still made her question her own sanity. The wedding morning dawned clear and bright, an improbable blue sky for an English spring. Emma donned the bridal gown she had designed and partially sewn herself, a simple ivory satin dress with delicate embroidery that reflected her craft without ostentation. When she looked in the mirror, she saw no longer the tired seamstress from Mayfair, but a woman transformed by love into something stronger. Christopher knocked on the door, entering already dressed in his new suit, eyes sparkling with excitement. "You look beautiful, Mother," he said shyly. Fusing the title that now came naturally, Emma knelt, hugging him carefully so as not to wrinkle her dress. "And you look extremely handsome. Your father will be proud." "Both of them," Christopher corrected seriously. "I have two parents now, you and him." The ceremony was everything Emma had ever dreamed of and more. The small chapel was decorated with wildflowers she had preferred over elaborate arrangements, and the pews held faces genuinely happy for them. As she began her walk down the aisle, there was no one to give her away, but it didn't matter. She was giving herself away by her own choice. William waited at the altar, impeccably dressed but with eyes only for her. When their gazes met, Emma saw tears slide unashamedly down his face, and her own mirrored them. The vows were traditional but laden with particular meaning. As they promised to love each other in joy and sorrow, in richness and poverty, both understood deeply what such words signified. They had experienced both extremes, together and apart. "With this ring I thee wed," William slid a gold band onto her finger, his voice trembling with emotion. "And I promise to honor you all the remaining days of my life." When they were finally declared husband and wife, the kiss they shared sealed not merely a legal union, but a fusion of souls that recognized each other across all social and circumstantial barriers. The celebration that followed was joyful, but intimate. Christopher insisted on making a toast, rising in his chair with comical seriousness. "To Mother and Father," he declared solemnly, "for finding me when I was lost, and for finding each other." The guests raised their glasses, but Emma and William only had eyes for each other and for the boy who had brought them together. In that moment, surrounded by love and acceptance, Emma finally allowed herself to completely believe in the impossible made real. Later, as night fell and the guests departed, William found Emma in the garden, watching the emerging stars. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her hair. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "Never," Emma replied with absolute certainty. "This is exactly where I belong. We will build a wonderful life together," William promised, "for us and for Christopher." And looking at the future that stretched before them, Emma knew it was true. They had begun as strangers, united by tragic circumstance, but had become a family chosen by love. The journey would not always be easy. Society would not quickly forget her humble origins, but they would face everything together. The seamstress who had found a crying boy in the street had discovered not only purpose but complete redemption, not only for the boy and his father, but for herself. And on that star-strewn night, with the man she loved holding her, and the son she had chosen sleeping peacefully within the house, Emma Hartwell Ashford was finally home.